when people are looking to apply to jobs, there's this question you get every time. Every time. Will you require sponsorship now or in the future? Now, I am of the notion that you should be lying blatantly in that document and deal with that problem later in your career. Abdul Salah is a more decent human being and thinks you should be honest throughout.
So one thing that I always say is always be honest in these.
Thank you. You know what, Aisha, as a professional, that is her professional opinion, and we're gonna stick to it.
I'm gonna tell you why.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Japa Diaries podcast episode. We missed you last week, but we came back with extra pizzazz this week, no?
No, we had episodes.
It's true, we gave them Ife last week. Okay. So they're just...
We're just back to normal.
No, but we're spoiling them again with another extra special guest.
That is true.
Because
that is true.
The podcast has gone professional.
Yes, we have.
You understand? You know how we do like to do a fact check, so things of that nature, We're bringing professionalism into documenting African immigrant experiences in the diaspora.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, on this week's episode, we have the one and only Aisa Diallo.
Esquire.
You dropped the Esquire. How dare me?
Hi everyone. Hi. I'm so excited to be here. It's like crazy.
Bro, I'm so gassed to do this episode, so that you are just as excited. It's like we're gonna have a swell
That's
time.
the energy, right? Energy.
Yes. Okay. So we talked a lot about I feel like from season 1, honestly, things will come up and we're just like, we should have an immigration lawyer on this piece.
So someone that can answer this question.
Yes,
who will settle this matter now?
Yes. And so I was telling her yesterday, I don't even know how I found her Instagram. I just saw it and I was just like, oh, follow.
The universe was y'all need to know each other.
Yes. And then I reached out to her and she was like, absolutely, yes, let's go. And I was like, we're doing it.
Okay.
And ladies and gentlemen, you are welcome.
Yep.
We're making this happen.
Yes.
Aisha, I think before we get into the entire episode of essentially just demystifying the US immigration process, I'm very curious, what is your family's Japa story? How did your family end up in the US? Because I hear the name, I hear the last name. It's giving West African girly. So what's the story there?
I really want to go francophone too.
Possibly.
Yeah, but I don't speak French though.
Je n'ai pas français.
We're colonized by the French, but I only speak English. But so my parents are from Guinea. And they came to the US. I'm trying to remember. I have an older brother, so late mid 80s. They were kind of the first Guineans to be in New York City in the Bronx. So every time everyone's asking who my dad is, I'm like, yep, that's it.
Wow.
So it was always in my bloodline to do immigration. But yeah, and then older brother, I have 3 siblings, and we were all here in the US, and then just go back and forth between home and the US.
Yeah.
I imagine that had a little bit of something to do with your career path.
Yeah, definitely.
Really? I don't know, because both your parents came to the US at the same time.
Yeah, at the same time. It was a year apart, and then my mom came.
Okay.
Then you also sound like you're the last one.
And then I have 3 siblings.
No.
Are you the last born? Or
no, I'm the oldest. I'm the second oldest, but they treat me like the oldest.
Well, they were all born here. So I don't think you'd have had too complicated of an immigration or a Japa story. But however, I think you had motivations around immigration that pushed you into the path of immigration law.
Yep, it's like being in the community, right? Like hearing the aunts, the uncles dealing with immigration, like hearing about people going back to Guinea as being young, like they wouldn't tell you, oh, this person was deported, right? But they'd just be like, oh,
Mm,
yeah, he went home. And it's just like, well, why are they not here anymore? You know, like,
yeah.
and then just like growing older, I actually did what led me into immigration was I did a while I was in undergrad. My thesis was on immigration. And so I looked into like the Immigration Nationality Act and I was like, this is so unfair. Like, why
Mhm.
do we punish people who are immigrants, right? Or refugees twice? And I was like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do.
What
This is
is the
what
act? Tell us
And
about the act.
it's,
Yeah.
yeah, how they punish twice.
yeah, so the Immigration Nationality Act is where immigration law lives. And
Okay.
it's been, I think it was like in the 1700s is when they
Oh,
first developed it. And like, if you read what they were like, they basically were like, we don't want straight up like these type of people in this country. Like, that's how
mm,
bad it was. And then you see the progression and you're like, wait, we're still doing that, right? Like we're
yeah.
still restricting Black people. We're still restricting certain classes of people from coming into the U.S. And so
Hmm.
we've the years have passed, but the law has not kind of changed with society. So I was just
Mm,
like, yep, this is me. This is where I'm gonna be. So
yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
always since that time always knew I wanted to kind of like end up in immigration and do immigration law.
And you were already like trying to do law school at that point?
So when I was in undergrad, went in as a business major, but then
Mm.
switched over to law and psychology. And I was like, I'm gonna be a forensic science. I love law and
Come
order,
on.
right? And
Come
then
on. And
immigration.
what's okay? NC and
NCIS.
CAIS.
That's all I binge. That's all I watch. And my parents were like, "Yep, she's gonna be a cop. We're gonna have a cop
Mhm.
family." But then, like after discovering everything about like immigration, I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do law school." So I actually graduated early from college and had taken the
Mm.
LSAT, and so was just kind of like prepping to figure out what I wanted to do.
Nice,
There you
nice,
go.
nice. I like when your calling finds you like that. Like
Mm.
you think you want to do one thing and then it's like,
This
no,
note
this.
was planned for you.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's
yeah.
exactly what happened to me because I was like, got to a law school, Vermont Law, and they have a master's program. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do law school. I'm going to just do a year master's in environmental law because around
Hmm.
that time, climate change refugees, right? So we were hearing about
Yeah.
all of the mudslides in Sierra Leone, the
Mm.
Mm,
snow in Egypt. So I was like, oh, I don't need to do immigration law. I can just work for a nonprofit who focuses on climate change refugees. I
mm,
graduated from that program and like in 2015, nobody cared about climate change. It was so
mhm.
hard to find a job.
Yeah.
And I was like, you
Wow.
know what? I'm already out of law school. I have my LSAT. Let me just continue. And so
Yeah.
that's when I was like, this is my calling.
Mm.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. So, what are like the more common cases you handle for African immigrants? And actually, how long have you also been doing this as well?
Whew, I feel like if I tell, it's going to age me, but I'm hitting like 6 years
you
in
you
doing
got
this.
okay, okay,
Yes.
Nice. Okay.
nice. I'm going to tell you, can give a range. You understand? You can just
Oh,
say
no,
two
six
to
years.
six.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it feels
Okay.
like once you hit like a certain amount of time practicing law, they like everything goes up. So like everything that you have to
Hmm.
pay for, like your continuing legal education credits, it's just like now you got to pay for everything because you're old. That's how I feel.
Yeah, they're like, you're not a recent grad no
Yeah,
more.
I'm just
And you
like,
got money.
Yeah, yeah,
that's what
yeah.
they think, and I'm just like, come on, you guys see the way
Relax.
the tax system is working right now. But
Yeah.
for my cases, so my background is in working with people who have criminal convictions, so like state criminal convictions, and then immigration picks them up. So if you have, for example, possession of a firearm, right? You got caught with a gun, and
Mhm.
then you took a guilty plea. The state picks you up. You're doing your time in state custody. What
Mhm.
happens is immigration will place what's called a detainer on you, and they'll say, we're going to put a hold on you. So even when your time to be released comes up, we're going to take you and put you into federal detention. That's why we have the immigration detention centers. And so a lot of people, what I realize is a lot of people don't understand, once you have that detainer on you, you have to present a case in immigration court, right? Why should they not return you back to your home country? Because under the law, your criminal conviction, and of course, it's up to you to prove that your criminal conviction does not have immigration consequences. And if it does, then it becomes like really, really hard for you to defend as to why they should allow you to stay in the country. So that's my background. I've done that for most of the time that I've been doing immigration law. And I also do people who come through the border. So like, I would say like 30% of my work is the people who come through the border, who are seeking asylum, and immigration proceedings for that.
Okay. So now I can see what you mean by the punish twice.
Yeah.
Catch 22.
Yeah.
And it's always like, it's unfortunate because I was working in New York, I'm licensed in New York, was working up in Buffalo, and a lot of people who would like have these consequences are minorities, right? And it kind of ties into the criminal justice system, right? Like the fact that we've been saying the criminal justice system is biased, right? Like when you give someone a sentence for possession of a firearm, right? Like someone who's a minority from an inner city is likely to get more like a higher offense, right? We know Hunter Biden right now has just been found guilty of freaking possession of a firearm. So I'm really waiting to see like what are they going to sentence him to, because I've had young African kids who were sentenced to the maximum 5 years in New York City. So I'm like, okay, Hunter, what you getting?
What's coming for you?
Okay,
Damn.
yeah. So Delaware now, let's see.
Yeah. I mean, was he in Delaware when this happened?
I think his trial was in Delaware.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So
All right.
I'm like, let's see, because I'm finna make a podcast about it.
Yeah. Like, okay, I was actually gonna say, like, are most of your clients like Black immigrants?
So now they are. Now that I've
Okay.
created my own law practice, like the reason why I created the law
Right.
practice was to focus on the disparity of representation for Black migrants, right? So before it was everyone, I was doing pro bono, so we didn't discriminate against anyone. And there is a lot of people who are in detention who need lawyers, who need the representation. But after a while, it was just like, just Black people are not getting the same level of
I'm
doing this, so like let me open up my law practice. And it's been a journey, but we have been assisting a lot of people who otherwise would have been screwed in the system.
Yeah. I imagine that. So like at your practice now, like what are you guys primarily handling? Are you still doing like the criminal cases? Is that still your area of expertise?
Yeah, so we do the criminal cases, but not as much as before. Asylum has been the big thing. So we have some asylum cases. We have been pushing a lot of people to apply for citizenship. It's election year.
Get it in now.
We don't know who's about to win the president. We don't know where immigration is going to go. Like we thought that Biden was going to be kind of lenient with a little bit of the immigration laws, but what we're seeing is that it's just as bad, as like the prior administration. So we're always telling people, apply for citizenship, and we've been helping a lot with that. But now we also do business immigration, right? Those H-1Bs, the E-2s, EB-2s, the investor visas, because there is an option on like the business-based side for a lot of African countries, right? Like we know, like back home, right? Like mechanics, people who are chefs and things like that. And that gives you an avenue to be able to get a green card to come to the US to work, because we know that our labor market here in the US is like really declining, and it's
Yeah.
not good. Inflation keeps going up. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
because our labor market is pretty weak. And so
Mm-hmm.
what my partner and I have been doing and what we want to do is emphasize that these visas are available for people on the continent of Africa. So that's like our main focus for like the next quarter and the coming years. So if you
Mm-hmm.
know anyone.
Trust me.
See, because now that's actually two things I'll talk about. I'll talk about this asylum path to citizenship and some of the challenges that come about that application process, as well as this business one that you've
Yeah.
outlined as. But I also wanted to quickly go back to the work you were doing with people at the border. Is that the same as asylum
Yes.
seeking? Is it the same? Okay, so it's the
Yeah,
same
so people come through
immigration
the border.
process.
If you come through the border in order, so what happens is you get to the border. There are officers all over the border, so they'll catch you, or you present yourself to an officer if you see them, and then they will arrest you and bring you to a detention center.
I have a
They'll
serious
fingerprint
question.
you.
Don't judge
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
The US is having a couple of borders. Which are we talking? Southern?
It's south.
Oh, it's
Even
all
now,
of them. So
yeah,
It's
you've
true,
not
it's true,
heard
it's true,
that
it's
people
true.
are
Oh,
crossing
so Canada
from
too. They want to Japa as
yes,
well.
yes.
Nice
yeah,
one.
so it's all of the borders because it's federal law. Like the process is
Mm-hmm.
the same throughout any border that you go through. And
Mm-hmm.
so what happens is they'll fingerprint you,
That's it.
lift you. They
Thank
will
you.
take DNA swabs, which is something that I recently learned of, which I'm like,
That's
whoa.
Mm.
crazy.
It's
Yeah.
good now. Let me have your data.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
like
exactly. So they
Where are
take
you going?
everything, your passport, your fingerprints, and then they will
and you're
issue.
getting like African immigrants like coming via the border.
Yep. 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 Yep.
This
Yep.
is
Yep.
From
insane.
where?
Yeah, I'm curious about
From
this.
Argentina, from Senegal, yeah,
So
Mauritania,
From the south border or from the northern?
from the
yeah, like
south. So the process is they go. So we've heard like a few of the journeys that they go. They'll go from like Senegal to Istanbul, and then
mhm,
Istanbul to like Bogota, and then they'll walk from Bogota all the way to the U.S., which is very dangerous.
yeah.
One thing that I learned is that uh, officials here, and you can see the data, but they keep track of the number of deaths that are happening by country, right, by
Yeah.
place of origin, and it's very saddening to see. Like a lot of people are losing their lives through that journey because it's very
Mm-hmm.
difficult.
It is.
We've heard stories of like sexual abuse that's happening, extortion. So it's very rough. It's a rough journey. And then when
Mhm.
you get here, you're in detention, you get processed. And in order for you to continue the process, right, you automatically are going to get assigned to go to immigration court. And then you have to tell if you have a fear of returning to your country. And that's what triggers the asylum.
Mm.
That's where you're seeking asylum if you have a legitimate fear of returning to your country.
Yeah.
Um, before we had this migrant crisis, what would happen is you would actually get an interview. So it's called a credible fear interview, where you
Mm.
would have an asylum officer who would do like a mini trial, and they'll
Mm-hmm.
ask you like, why are you afraid to go back, who do you fear, and they'll look based off of immigration law, is that a viable reason for this person to get asylum, right? And if it's not, then you would get turned around, or you can get a second review from an immigration judge. And if
Mm.
you were, then you would just continue with the process. But because so many people have been coming in and there's kind of been a migrant crisis, they've had to stop with the credible fear interviews.
Mm.
Order. Yeah.
So instead of that, like what happens now? You just go straight to the
Straight to
court.
courthouse.
Yeah. So, like, most people have been being released because the detention facilities are just at capacity or they're
I
not
was even gonna say,
sustainable.
yeah.
So now most people are just waiting for their first court date, and then they would have to go to court, and then just present in front of the judge. You typically have two hearings. You have your initial hearing where the judge asks like all of these questions: where are you from? Where did you enter? And then they'll ask you like, what applications are you going to file in immigration court? And then that would trigger your final hearing where you should have a lawyer and you would present evidence. It's like direct examination, cross examination. The judges
Mm-hmm.
ask a host of questions, and then they make a decision based off of the law. Um, does this entitle you to getting asylum, right? And asylum is really, really hard. Like, I think that's one misconception that people have. You can just cross
One
the
of the
border.
harder ones.
It's so hard to get asylum. You have to prove persecution. And in
Because I was
order,
just thinking, as you were saying, because I was like, yeah, they go through these steps and they have to prove to the immigration officer or to the
Judge, yeah.
exact. And I'm like, they need to have that argument ready before they come, right?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
at what point do they get a lawyer? Is it at the third stage or at the very first stage? Because some people might not be equipped with, what is the law? What would they be judging
yeah,
against? What are the buzzwords I need to be hitting on?
Yeah.
Things like that.
I'm
and
even
that's
also
the
curious,
thing.
like,
Like,
how humane is this process? Like,
yeah. Yeah. I mean, back in the day, it worked really well, right? It's just the fact that we have a migrant crisis and over time, like in immigration court, we're looking at the case law, right? Like we're looking at the precedent. For you have to prove persecution. Persecution is a very hard thing to establish. And you have to prove that, like, if you go back and that you can't internally relocate within the country. If you look at a country like Guinea, Guinea is huge, right? So if you're like, I'm going to face persecution, then the government is going to be like, well, you can just go
let's go
to
somewhere
a
else. Yeah.
small little village in the south and you'll be fine. And if they can prove that, then you're not eligible for asylum anymore because you can just go back to your country and relocate to another place. And so a lot of the case law that we've received also during the Trump administration, because of the judges, right, who are hearing these cases and creating the law, it's just gotten really, really harder to be able to establish based off of certain. Is not to take away that someone is afraid, right, that there are economic challenges on the continent or anywhere, right? Like we look at Venezuela and stuff like that. But when you have to prove it under what the law says, it just becomes a little bit more tougher.
Yeah, it's more strict. It's more rigid. Yeah.
What's an immigration crisis? Can you define that for us?
Yeah. So, that's a hard one, but an
Like the
immigration
migrant
crisis,
crisis.
I
Yeah.
think, would be is just like the system is overwhelmed, right? So before I can say, even before like I started practicing when I was still in law school, like the processes were going really quickly, and the immigration crisis is not only for the migrant crisis or what's happening at the border. If you look at like a marriage-based petition, right? You marry someone, you want to apply for your spouse so that you guys can be together. That process used to take about 6 months. It's taking about like 14 months right now, So it's like you have to wait all of that time and be separated from your loved one. That's an immigration crisis because
Wow.
immigration, if you look at the law, it's all about family unity. If you have to be apart from your loved one
Mm-hmm.
for so long, is that family unity? For people who apply for asylum who are not coming through the border, so say someone's on F1 status and then they're like, I really can't go home because I have this fear. It's taking like 7 years before you get a hearing with an immigration officer. It's like, so 7 years, what do you do in that time that
Yeah.
you're waiting, to know what your status is going to be? What happens? People get married, people have children, life happens, right? So then it's like by the
Yeah.
time you get to your interview for asylum, like do you even have a viable asylum application at that point? So
After, yeah.
yeah, so and the crisis is that the system is so overwhelmed and people are overwhelmed, and it's not working efficiently right
The
now.
way it's supposed to. Yeah.
It's across the board.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. I'm ready to now talk about the business route.
Yes.
This is like the H1Bs.
Yeah, so like the H-1Bs, there are the EB-2s, the O-1 visas. What else?
Definition. Just be
Yeah,
specific.
I know. Okay, sorry.
Taking notes.
So the EB-2s are for like skilled. There's like a skilled worker and a non-skilled worker, right? So like if you are a skilled worker, you're in a profession. I'm trying to think of an example of what a skilled worker would be. So like we can say a chef, right? Like that person is skilled, and you have to have a sponsor, right? So you have to have like a job here already lined up, and that person has to show that they cannot find anyone who has your credentials, right? You're so
This is
skilled.
H1B.
No, EB2.
Is EB2.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So then you have to kind of show that like you're a skilled worker, and that here in the U.S. that employer cannot find someone to fill the position that they have. Then you can get a visa through that basis to be able to come in and do the work as a skilled person.
Mhm.
There's also non-skilled. So like if you are a hair braider or a mechanic.
Yeah, that's a skill set. So what are they
Yeah.
talking about?
Yeah, well, yeah, it is a skill, but
You know how much I'm paying.
just
This is a skill set. I don't have it. That's why I'm paying for it. That's crazy.
yeah.
Wow.
So
That's
then
that's
it could,
that's classism just showing its face.
but
Yeah.
also
My
like
mom
how
can prove
well
that nobody in
I can
America
I
can do
can
it.
assure you that if I bring my brain. Okay, all right, okay.
so, but you can convince it, right? If it is a skilled job, then you can argue that this is skilled and it should fit under the criteria of a skilled worker.
Mhm.
The O1 visa is for people who are in the arts, the sciences. What else is there? There's art, sciences, basketball players. You get to come to the US based off of that. Of course, you
Mhm.
have to have someone who's willing to sponsor you. And
Mhm.
then you can get a visa based off of that to be able to come in and play and do concerts and work with other
All that kind of
brands and
thing.
things like that. So it's really cool. H1B, HB, all of that. I'm not the professional. That's all my partner. So I don't want to like say
Mhm.
anything wrong, but the H1Bs, those are for people who, of course, like you're high rated, right? Like you're in those engineerings, PhD, in those, what is it? In those fields where they're just up there, right? Like I haven't seen anyone do lawyer for like an H1B or anything, but we see
Not yet. Not
engineering,
yet.
yeah, the architectures, those scientific fields. But
Mhm.
it's there. It's an option. A lot of people are going to school right now. A lot of people have a lot of skills that they can be able to get visas off of, and we just wanna highlight that, right? It's almost like highlighting
Mhm.
that the continent also has people who are capable of adding to
Mhm.
the U.S. economy.
Mhm.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
There's this visa about like, if you invest into the
Yeah.
US economy, is that a business related one as
Yes,
well?
it is. It's a E2,
What
and if you got some money,
what's the number on that one? What's the number on it?
Yeah.
Just tell me. Just tell me what's the number. And you can give me a range. You can give me a range.
we would say anywhere between 80,000 to like 120,000.
Hmm.
If you have that
Like, so this is how
money,
much you invest,
yep, in a
like
business,
expense.
invest in a business here, you could get a green card. And we're also
That's
like, where's all the
crazy.
people with the money? Like, come on.
You can buy your way into immigration, really.
No,
Yeah.
You
jealous.
can
And
you
and
can
the
Like
really
best
that's
just
part
buy
is,
your
80
way.
grand a
yeah,
ticket. That's intense.
80 grand, 120 grand. That's not too much to some people.
Yeah, I guess. But for the normal people,
Fair enough. Fair enough.
that's even a nice middle class salary. That
Oh, for
yeah,
sure.
they choke.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
that's a whole year's salary. Yeah, yeah. And then just imagine like your business is going to be making money. So that investment that you put, you're going to double that, right? That's the
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
you put in that
Mm-hmm.
investment, you double it, and the U.S. economy is like the U.S. is like, all right, cool, you're helping us. Come on, come along, come along.
All right.
So essentially, in order to have access to the US, you need to somehow prove that one, you're either running away from something at home or you can contribute to our economy in a way that current US citizens aren't.
Yeah, or how they hope U.S. citizens should be, right?
Okay. First,
Yeah,
first,
because
first,
another
first,
thing is
first.
like if you have a green card, like you And there's like a fine line between what kind of state assistance you can get, right? Like there's this question of like, if someone has a green card, should they be applying for food stamps? Could they get housing assistance? And it's because if you get any type of assistance that is going to make you like a ward of the state, that the state is going to continue to have to give you, they can take your green card back because of that. Because they're like,
because now you're a liability.
yeah, we don't want you to be living off of us. We gave you a green card.
Well, you to be feeding
You
us.
are supposed to be feeding us, yeah, not the other way around.
Wow.
They're like, no. Like, get your citizenship, and then maybe we'll think about it. But that's also something that like a lot of people have had to think about, right? And then you just get into this whole thing about like, even for us citizens here, like how expensive healthcare is. It's like, how can someone who doesn't have papers like afford healthcare and things like that? So
yeah, okay. I was just thinking to myself, I want to relate this to Africans. So in all the different types of visas and stuff like that, is there any unique challenges for African immigrants compared to maybe Canadian, Latin immigrants? Is there any challenges specific to Africans that you've been seeing? And does it vary from country to country?
Yeah, I think it's the whole system. Like the whole entire system is a challenge for Africans. If you look at, so we have the diversity visa, right? So the diversity visa, it's incredible. It's basically a lottery system. And you apply, and if you are picked from the lottery, you get to enter the US, no restrictions, nothing. You get to come to the US with a green card. You wait 5 years, you get your citizenship. It's amazing. The problem is that for a lot of African countries, they're not given the diversity visas, right? So if you look at places like Senegal, Guinea, Mauritania, Ghana, Nigeria, I think is not even a country for them.
Yeah, the bundles,
they were just like, no, we're not going to even allow y'all this opportunity. And then
we have enough of y'all. We're done.
They're like, no. So you think about it, and you're just like, what's the reason behind that? That like a lot of these African countries don't get the same numbers of visas to be able to play in the lottery, right? You look at the investor visa. Guinea is not a country where if you wanted to invest in the US that you can apply.
Even
if you have your 80 to 120K.
Yeah, even if you have it, they're just like, we don't want anyone from that country to.
And do they give like that? Do they give reasons?
Yeah, they can. It's not a treaty country, so they're just like, we're not gonna. We're not going to allow you to.
The geopolitical space for both our countries is not
exactly. So then you look at the politics of all of it. When Trump passed the Liberian Refugee Act for Liberians, right? You could just apply, and if you applied and you got it, you got a green card. It didn't matter what your background was with immigration. It was cool. It was really, really cool. But then you think of all of these other African countries, and of course it's for Liberia. It's because Liberia is colonized by the US. Yeah. So saying colonized sounds crazy, but it is, and so it's a US.
Yeah.
So it's just like, you think of it and you're like, why don't a lot of these African countries have the same numbers or opportunity level as other places outside of the continent? And so that's why I say it's like the whole immigration system. There's a bias that exists for Black immigrants, right? You look at Haiti. Right. Like if we think about the history of Haiti and what's happening right now, like to get a claim for asylum based off of what we're hearing is happening in Haiti is really, really difficult as well because of the laws.
And it's nasty too. Yeah.
And it's nasty what's happening over there, right? You would think we should be doing something to help the people, but immigration system just unfortunately doesn't think of it like that.
Okay. Randomly, I'm just thinking about another question that we had when we're talking about someone who was going through the H1B process. I know you said that's not really your area of expertise, but let me just see if there's any information you might have for us. When people are looking to apply to jobs, there's this question you get every time. Every time. Will you require sponsorship now or in the future? Do you need a work visa of any kind? So and so. Now, I am of the notion that you should be lying blatantly in that document and deal with that problem later in your career.
Hmm.
Abdul Salah is a more decent human being and thinks you should be honest throughout. What furthers your chances of actually being considered for that H1B visa when you answer that question?
So one thing that I always say is always be honest in these
Thank you.
forms.
You know what, Aisha, as a professional, that is her professional opinion, and we're gonna stick to it.
I'm gonna tell you why. And I
Yeah.
say this to my clients. I'm like, if you come to me and we're doing a consultation, be honest with me. I don't care if you have like done the worst of the worst thing. Tell me because that's how I can best represent you. The thing
Yeah.
about the immigration system is that if you lie, they are not giving you a second chance. They will
Yeah.
come for you and they'll be like, nope, you're done. You can file for a
Mhm.
waiver if you're eligible or if it exists, but with immigration, and we're seeing it right now, and this is how we know that the system is kind of going downhill. They won't find out next year or the next day. It can take them 15 years for them to find out. And they'll go back and they'll be like, oh, yeah, you lied to
Wow.
us. We're taking this, and here's all of the consequences. They're slow with figuring it out, but they will figure it out. Like
What
they
I say, it's always what? Cost.
Last
15 years.
line.
Can you imagine living your life? You've so that job that you were hustling for, you got it, you got your next one, all is well, you got your wife, your family, all is well. They said, Uncle, remember that one time when you were
Yep.
a college student and you were hustling? Well, it's a wrap.
You go there, explain.
Yeah.
On this date, you filed this, and now we are going to rescind it. You have to leave the country within 30 days. And then it's like, what do you do? Or they'll put you in immigration court. And like, once you're like, I always tell people, you do not want to be in immigration court because you're in front of a judge, but the options that you have once you're in immigration court are so limited. And if it's for something like they call it fraud and misrepresentation, it's
Yeah.
you're out.
We're out.
You're
Yeah.
out. Yeah. So I always say be
Unless you come
honest.
out of ground.
Yeah.
All right, guys, I was wrong.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I hope you just
Honest.
professional information.
I was wrong.
Yes.
Sorry, it was just
Not for
Nigerian.
immigration.
Yeah, did that. Thank you. Okay, so I guess I am a bit curious of like what kind of like misconceptions people have about like African immigrants out here, because you're to some extent you're working on like the US end of things, right? And you have this like common thread of like having African origin with these migrants. On the US side, like what do you see people essentially, how are they viewing
Immigration
yeah,
process.
how are they viewing migrants? Like how are they, because I know you said like there's systematic biases, but even just like as a society, like what are we perceiving African immigrants as?
Yeah, I think like what I've been seeing and kind of hearing it's kind of that like, and I can give the example of like New York City because I was working in New York City when the migrant crisis was happening. I was kind of there, and like just seeing what's happening now with a lot of African migrants who are doing like the delivery service, right? They're just like, you guys are just here to work, but you don't work. And so that's another like catch 22. It's like, are migrants working or are they not working, right? Like they're doing the jobs that a lot of people are not doing. Or like the biggest thing is that like African migrants don't deserve asylum, right? A lot of people assume that migrants who are coming in are only coming in for like economic reasons, right? Which may or may not be true, but the process is still the process. So they're still entitled to being able to present their case, right?
Yeah.
There are people who have suffered some sort of harm that does entitle them to some sort of relief, and they should be given that opportunity, right? Like I also think that there's a lot of people are not educated as to the continent. And
Yeah.
so they would see one African from one place and try to group that as all Africans, right? And it's like every
Mhm.
country in Africa has different cultures, have different norms. And so what one person might do from that country is not the same as like another. So you can't collectively say Africans are XYZ. And
I will agree with you, except on one thing.
oh,
This is something we recently discovered. West Africans were actually all the same people, and it's kind of the same.
You think?
Yes. We talked about this like yesterday. So
oh yeah,
Aisha's full
yeah,
name,
yeah.
right, is Aisha. Is that not the most Yoruba Muslim thing to
Oh, no more,
do?
no more, no more.
To change somebody's name from Aisha to Aisha to
Yes, yes.
like
We do like that. We do like that.
yeah. And so I don't know. It kind of blew my mind. Like when we were talking about it yesterday, I was like, oh no, we're
We're on the
actually
same
kind
page.
of the same. And how many countries are between us two? So you know what? We're all doing it in the region too.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. We just
But we're
picked up.
also not the same guys. Don't
Yeah.
that's
Don't get
between
twisted.
us. That's between us. We can joke about that. You can't.
Right,
Um,
right. You can. But
nothing
yeah,
else.
so those are like a lot of the misconceptions that exist, especially for like Africans, and it's really hard because, like I said, there aren't a lot of people who are extending to help African migrants the
Mhm.
same because there is this thing of like, oh, this is like their claims are just going to be based off of like economics and the law doesn't allow for that. And it's like, but you're not speaking to the person, right? Like, see if they do have a claim or if there's something there, or see if they've one thing. This isn't for migrants now, but like a lot of in the past, and a lot of people in the African community have been victims to crimes, right? Like the taxi drivers,
Mhm.
or just like random street robberies. There is an avenue in immigration for people who have been victims to crime, and I learned that a
Mhm.
lot of people don't know that, right? Like a lot of
I
Africans.
didn't know that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's called the U visa. And if you've been a victim to a crime and you've worked with prosecution or the police, you can get a green card through that avenue, right? Because the
I mean, like that's very nice reparations right there.
Yeah.
That's that's
Yeah.
the wait
very nice.
time
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
crazy, but
I'm
if
sorry
you
for your
still
trauma. Here's your green card.
Hey,
green
my
card,
bad. Here's your future. That's actually really nice.
now the wait time for that application is crazy, but you at least have
Yeah.
like an avenue, right? And a lot of people
Mhm.
don't know that. So when I like first started out, I was like going to mosques and like giving these talks and talking to like the old generation of people, and people were just like, wait, what? Like
Mhm.
that's a thing. Can you help me? Like I was robbed,
Mhm.
and I'm just like, well, we can talk about it. We can look at it, but
Yeah.
it's just because of those misconceptions. I think the African migrants and African immigrants just don't have as much knowledge and information
Mhm.
about the immigration system.
I
Are there any
think.
more
Yeah. I was going to say.
non-traditional routes?
I
What
know.
else
I'm
can
like
happen?
thinking. Yeah, I said that.
Mhm.
I like responded to someone on one of our Instagram posts. I was like, there's so many like neat things in immigration that like you can pull to try to like get status on. Like the immigration system, what we're seeing now is because of the wait times, it's not so good, and the way that the laws are progressing are not as good. But there are like a little bit of cool things that like you can grab to be like, oh yeah, I could get a green card based off of this, or I can do this within the immigration system. It's not all bad.
Mhm.
Okay. Because I know you mentioned the diversity one too. You can apply for a diversity visa. Now, this one, if a crime has happened to you, people are going to stage crimes.
Oh.
But that's the thing, they put that you have to assist the prosecution or the police, so you can't
Mhm.
stage your crime
You
and then
can't just say I was robbed and
Okay,
therefore,
okay,
yeah.
okay.
You
because
have
then
to
if
actually
they
help
find out
them
that you the one who did it,
convict.
if you
Yeah.
staged it, like it's over. You
Yeah.
ain't get no type.
So what I'm also hearing is that if there's an ongoing gang in my neighborhood, and I saw one or two things,
Ah.
and I snitched, green
Oh.
card.
So there
Green
is
card
there
and
is an
protection
S
program,
visa.
please.
An S visa is for people who assist law enforcement with like investigations and stuff. And like I've seen that with like the FBI. So like if I was representing someone who was incarcerated, but they had assisted the FBI in some way, there's a visa that you can get. The FBI, that agency, would sign off. The hardest part is getting them to sign off. But if they do, then you have a pathway to get a green card. Now, if you want to snitch, you know, the
Are they
consequence.
offering protection program with that visa?
Well,
Because
I like how Aisha is almost saying I can't condone snitching. I'm surprised.
you gotta think about the consequences, right? Like you gotta think about it full through. That's why we're here to, you know, that's why lawyers are here to help you, to help you think of the 360.
I have is there like a resource where there's just like an A to Z of like all the visa? Because everything O, B, H1, U, I'm like, there has to be like a dictionary of stuff like this,
Yeah,
right?
so on the United States USCIS, right? Like you can type in the search and they'll give you everything. They'll give you the immigration law. They'll give you all of the visas that exist. Sometimes on the Department of State website, they lay out everything on that website as well.
USCIS.gov.
Yeah.
All right. Me, I'll be going there after this
No,
because
no,
I'm
no.
actually very
Researching.
I don't know how much you're keeping up with like your clients, after like, assisting them in their case and going to court and all that good stuff. But like, what kind of cultural adjustments do you see Africans having to make when they come to the US, whether it's for like the asylum visa or any other kind of visa? Like, what's a common thread you see?
Yeah, so this would be for like a lot of our like marriage based, right? So like people who are married and then they bring over a spouse, but even the asylum too. I think it's the getting used to the lifestyle that we have here in America. Like one thing that I always say is that we are so like we're consumerists, right? Like everything is you work to pay for this. You work for the rest of your life, like 24/7 all the time. But back home, and this isn't only for like African countries, right? Like you relax, you have family time. And so like what I've seen is that for a lot of people, that's like a quick realization that they have. They're like, oh snap, I need to work 23 hours and only sleep an hour. And then they're like remembering back home, they didn't work as much and were living a relatively good life, right? So I've seen that. And it's always like when I'm talking to someone and I'm like, yeah, I would love to go back, back home and just like work a few hours and then relax and have time with the family. They're like, no, America is great. You work all the time and you make money. And I'm like, you make money to give all your money. Like, I don't.
But you know what? If that was what you came for, if you came for the hope of like economic like success, like the idea of like being able to continue working,
it might not be that
as at first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just thinking like we're lucky in the sense that I actually never worked in Nigeria, so I don't really have anything else to compare it to. I've only known this hellfire.
This is the
only thing I know,
Yeah, and that's another thing. It's like even if you did come here for like economic reasons, down the line, I think a lot of people realize that like you start getting health issues, right? Because of the quality of food and then just like your mental health and then just like your children growing up in an inner city, the influence around them. So I think a lot of those things.
There's a casualty.
Yeah, I don't know. Like immigration is not sounding desirable anymore.
Yeah. It's like, so now that we're here, what was it for?
Yeah.
It's like, is this the same? I think there's like what I've heard is like a big comparison of struggles, right? It's like the struggle. Is this struggle in the US better than the struggle back home? And
I think most people would argue definitely would rather choose this struggle because to be flying from Guinea to Istanbul, then to Bogota, then walking or finding your way to the US border from there, putting your life at risk, I'm sure I'm sure they'd rather do this.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. But it also like
That was
I think
intense.
in my perspective, right? I'm just like, is it worth it though? But then again, there's a different level of privilege that I have that I
Yeah.
sometimes that's my
Yeah,
bias that I sometimes have to
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
bring myself back and be like, okay,
yeah,
I can't compare myself to you.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Have to listen to you and try to
Mm-hmm.
assist you the best way I can. What resources can I give you to help you?
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I need to remind myself of that one too, just in my daily regular life also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you did mention that we are in an immigrant crisis, right? It is an election year,
Hey God.
you know. So from a policy standpoint, what do you anticipate for the immigration process in the future? In your opinion, better, worse, more of the same? What do you think?
I think, oof, I don't think we're heading towards,
It's not looking good.
yeah, it's not looking good. So there's been recently a policy that was passed by the Biden administration to basically close the border. And what he did is he looked at the Immigration Nationality Act, which holds all of the immigration law, and he picked one that hasn't been
Mm.
used in years. It's called 212F. And so basically what he did is the border is closed right now. They're only allowing 2,500 people to enter. If you look at the
A
number
day, a year, like what is that?
a day, if you look at how many people previously were entering just one border,
Mm-hmm.
let's say Arizona, it was about 10,000 people a day.
A day.
A day.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're saying this is why I called it a crisis. This is why it's called a crisis. Now you're saying you're
Mm-hmm.
only going to allow 2,500 people, um, which just kind of like shows you like who's getting in. It questions who's getting in, and they're going to close it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the goal sounds like it's until they can regulate what's happening here in the States, right? There's a backlog in
Mm-hmm.
immigration courts and they want to kind of figure out what's happening. So the solution is to push all of the cases that are backlogged up, which means more
Mm-hmm.
judges are going to be overworked, the department is going to be overworked, and lawyers, defense lawyers, are also going to be overworked. But the
Mm-hmm.
goal is figure out these cases, get them out. I think there's going to be more removals happening. I feel like we are going to get back to that era where you're going to have officers knocking on people's doors and just putting them on planes. We might be heading that way. But so that's on the removal, people coming in through the border. But then we also have like we're hearing a lot of stories of like people who are applying based off of like marriage based and things like that. Those cases are going much quicker, which is a good thing. Again, just getting that backlog out. It is an election season, so naturalization, citizenship, we're seeing that kind of moving forward. But DACA, I think by the time
Mm-hmm.
the end of the year comes, we're going to know what's going to happen with DACA.
Mm-hmm.
Where the DACA case lives right now is in a circuit that is not immigration friendly. So
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of attorneys are gearing for DACA to no longer exist. Um,
Yeah.
if that is the case, it's what happens with that. A lot of people who are on DACA are police officers, are nurses.
Yeah,
Um,
like what happens to current DACA
yeah,
recipients?
exactly. So like what's going to happen? There is talks of another policy coming out for people who are married. So like you're a US citizen and you're married to someone who doesn't have status. There's a program that they're thinking about implementing for protection of those spouses, but we don't know. We don't know if it's going to pass. We don't know if it's even going to happen. It's just like a lot of talk right now. So it's like the law is a balance, right? Like you have the lady who has the balance thing, and with it,
Mm-hmm.
that's what we're seeing. We're seeing like a whole bunch of negative things, but then we're seeing a little bit of positive. So it's kind of
Yeah.
it's hard to tell. It just depends on where in the immigration system you are. Oh, and then with business, they're
Uh-huh.
talking about increasing all of the fees, and it's just like how can people?
So it's going to go up from that 80 to 120K range.
Well, no, so like to apply. So right now it's
Mm-hmm.
roughly about
Just the
thousand
process. Yeah.
dollars to apply.
How
Imagine
much?
having about
1K.
$3,000 to $4,000
To apply for what?
just in application fees. So now imagine if that goes up to $6,000 to $8,000 just in
Eh?
application fees. So we're, and then the numbers they're thinking about rolling back. How many? Because it's all a cap, right? It's only a certain
Mm,
number that they give, but they're thinking about rolling back on that number because
even more.
they're saying that the labor market is doing so well in the U.S. that I mean,
Is
You
it?
don't, that you don't need.
Amazon like totally canceled all of the work visas that they were giving for their employees because they don't need foreigners, they don't need immigrants anymore because they're saying that they have enough people here in the States to cover those jobs. So
And Amazon doing that, that's precedent.
Yeah.
What about like for like student visas and things like that? Because I know a lot of our listeners, like you already touched on like the H1B, which I know a lot of our users, but like the F1 visas as well,
yeah,
how
so
this impact
yeah, with the
them.
F1 visas, that's very like country specific, right? So it depends on what country you're from, if and if the consulate kind of grants you that. If you get accepted to a
Mm,
school, it's very I think schools, because since COVID the numbers have dropped for enrollment, they're kind of like, yeah, we'll accept people if you have the grades and everything, but then the problem becomes if you're at a consulate like Guinea, where it's impossible to get an interview, and you can't show proof of funds and things like that. If they deny you,
mhm,
you don't have that opportunity. So that's also very
mm.
country specific, and the African countries are a little bit more tougher when it comes to that. So
Yeah.
that
I know
scale,
the appointment system is tough too. Like even for like just getting an appointment with the consulate
mhm,
back home, like the backlog on them as well is almost out 2 years.
but that,
Hmm.
yeah, it in Ghana for like a marriage based petition, it's out like 4 years. And it's like 4 years without your spouse, like 4 years.
Yeah.
And then you've already
Um,
put all that money into the fees. Can you keep traveling back to
Yeah.
see one another, right?
Yeah.
eh.
And then even
You
I'm
might have
even
to get
thinking
married
about it.
again at the end of the 5 years.
And then yeah, I'm thinking about it like even like if you even do not get into school because like there's less of like they're more likely to like want students.
Mhm.
What was is there a real pathway after that? Because we're seeing that like it's just getting stricter, they're taking in less people, the like so I actually wonder about that. Like is there a real like feasible path to citizenship for someone who isn't in like an extraordinary case where like they're running from something and
That's
it's literally somebody that's just
the average
trying
Joe.
to find like an economic future outside of like where they came from? Is there a real path?
I think with anything in immigration, it's hard to tell, and there isn't a real path. And that sounds so terrible to say as like an
Mm.
immigration lawyer,
Honesty,
Yeah, but
yeah,
yeah, we need to be
but
honesty,
aware of
yeah.
the reality.
reality, right? Because like even anyone up, and I tell this to like a lot, I mean, it's on our posts on social media, asylum is not a guarantee. I think a lot of people have that misconception that you come in, you apply for asylum, it's a guarantee. That is not a guarantee. Like your chances
Mhm.
through the asylum system is like 70 losing, 30 winning.
Mm.
It's just not like, it's not a guarantee, and you should never think that it will be a guarantee for you.
It's
It's
a
always
numbers
a
game.
lawyer, exactly, and they'll sit down with you and go through everything that you have to prove and try to prove it. And if you lose, try to appeal, if there's a basis for appeal. But it's the same thing with people who come in with F1s. You do not have a guarantee. You're coming in with an F1 with the intention of doing school and then going back.
Mhm.
With the way that the labor market is going with the US, with the H1Bs and things like that, can you, like right now where we are, can you assume that after you finish school that you would get a visa based off of that? Probably not. And then we have to see with the election coming in November what, like, it's going to switch over, right? There are going to be different trends, like, so we'll have to look at what are those trends, what's happening in the world. Is inflation still going up? Like,
Mhm.
are they going to drop the interest rate? Because all of these things has a bearing on where anyone ends up. So
Chai, chai, chai,
I
chai,
know
chai.
it's sad. It's like I feel like as far as immigration, the US does have a I could be wrong, please correct me. They have a better path to citizenship than most Western countries. So like I
Yeah,
was going to ask, like what is it comparable to like the UK or just European immigration? Is it any better?
I think I do think so, because if you look at like what's happening in the UK right now with their asylum seekers and refugees, like the plan is anyone who comes into the UK for asylum, you are going to go to Rwanda.
Mhm.
They're going to process you, and it's just like you think about it, and you're like, what?
Can you imagine leaving Africa, doing all this waka to go to the UK? They say, "Oh, okay, wait, just wait back in your."
We'll do it from there.
Back in
I could have gone there straight now. Take her back.
The
Yes,
thing is, Rwanda right now is having their own housing crisis. So then you wonder,
yes,
how are you guys going to process all
the
of these
housing
asylum
us, yeah.
seekers, right? But I think the goal, and that's the thing with the UK, with France, with a lot of these European countries, their immigration system is, we want to deter you. We want you to feel like you
Mm,
don't want to be here. So we are not going to treat you. Um, we are not going to treat you as a human, right? Like, we're not going to treat you as a
yeah.
person. There's a story of someone, a young kid who was in Spain from Guinea, who committed, trigger warning, who committed suicide because he just could
Mm,
not take being in the detention facilities. And in the articles, it literally says that their immigration system is to deter people. They make the
mm,
condition so bad that they want to deter people from coming in, and they want you to tell your family and to tell other people to not come in
to
because of
not
what they will
come.
go through. The US, we have our things. We're not perfect, but
Yeah.
one thing in the US is they always want people, like, they want to pull that avenue for people to apply for citizenship. They want people to naturalize. If you look at the green card process, if you have a green card, they're like, bet we're going to give you an avenue for you to get citizenship. But if you go out of the US for 6 months or more, or you don't live in the US for a certain amount of time, we're going to restrict you from
Because
getting.
clearly you don't need it.
Yeah.
No, you don't
We're
need
going to take your
it.
green card back because you're showing us you don't even want to live here. So if you don't want to live here,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to take your
I
green
bet. I bet.
Mm-hmm.
card, right? So they're like, you tell
Yeah.
us what you want to do. You want to be here, or you want to go back
Or
to your
not, yeah.
country, like, but get your citizenship, and we'll give you all of these benefits of being a U.S. citizen. So
So essentially, it's the step from foreigner on a visa to green card that is hell. And I think once you're able to actually get that green card,
We're
then
almost there,
there's
baby.
a future in
yeah,
sight.
Almost there,
the
baby.
future,
Wow.
like, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
That's okay. I feel like we've discussed, I don't know that I feel any better about the immigration process. But
Guys,
surely,
go to Canada. Go to
surely,
Canada.
Even
Canada will take
Canada,
you.
no,
Whoa,
because
whoa, 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 whoa,
Canada
whoa,
has
whoa,
just been
whoa.
like, we are tired. Canada, I read recently, has had their most deportations in the last like 3 years or something. And Canada, usually you go there, they'll let you live. You don't have papers, cool. Just don't break anything. But they've been
Yeah, literally.
ramping up because they're just like, we are also tired. Because
yeah.
a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
from the US has been kind of like, well, not the US, but like people have been migrating through there too, and their system just cannot take
Mm-hmm.
it all. So Canada is just like, we're trying to figure it out too because we can't.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
Yeah.
This
Oh,
is
well.
heavy. Can we segue to maybe some like
Happy stories.
yeah, like some successful like tell us some success stories. Give the people some hope.
Yeah. So recently we've had quite a few grants with like the citizenship, like anything that's like straightforward citizenship. We're just like, we love it, right? Because we love to
Mm-hmm.
see old little grandmas and people getting their citizenship. Mostly, we've been seeing a lot of older people getting their citizenship now.
Mm-hmm.
Again, if you are nervous about like the reading portion of the exam or the writing portion of the exam, do it now. It's an election season. You get, like two chance and stuff. Um,
And this is being sponsored by their families.
well, just for citizenship, if you had a green card for 5 years,
Okay, yeah.
yeah. So we've been like, again, we've been really going at people to do that, and because of the wait times are so low, we've had like quite a few success with those. We've recently had a Jamaican couple get granted. So spouse is in Jamaica, wife is here. He's going to be joining her. So we love that. We love to see families.
Love, yeah.
And the interview process was so smooth. They didn't ask as many intrusive questions that we thought were going to come up. We've also seen it with Sierra Leone. We have a couple who are going to reunite here in the US from Sierra Leone. We love. What else have we had? With a lot of our immigration cases, unfortunately, they've been pushed back and then pushed forward. But one thing that I do is I always like ask the government, hey, can you stipulate with me? Can we make this like shorter than having a whole trial? So we've had success with a few of those cases. So instead of going to court, government is just like, yeah, we'll agree on XYZ. So we don't have to adjudicate those issues in court. And that's always a good thing because the judges are just like, yes, less time, we'll do it. So yeah.
He's giving lawyer because adjudicates.
Yeah, I was about to say, I will be Googling now.
I was like,
I was thinking in my head, I was like, what word can I use? That's the only word that was in my head.
It's okay. Esquire.
Come on.
Esquire.
Come on.
Yeah.
Wait.
Okay. I guess just winding down, what is some advice that you would give? Like, this is, by the way, guys, this is not legal.
Yes.
Formal legal advice.
While we're doing disclaimers as well, I also want to say that, I didn't really think you should be lying on your work application before.
Okay.
I was just saying that, I didn't really mean it. I didn't mean it, just disclaimer.
Okay. Since we're putting them out.
Yeah, it might as well.
Best.
Because now 15 years from now, they'll come and play this video. I said, you advocating. I said,
Yes, you're telling people to lie.
Yes, you're encouraging fraud. You're out of here, bro.
But we do not encourage fraud, right? Like
we do not.
Yes,
honest. And I think that's my first tip. That's my first piece of advice. Like all the time, be honest. I've had cases where people are like, but I can't be honest. I did X, Y. I'm like, so tell me, right? Like you pay me, tell me and I'll soften the blow, right? Like I will write the best cover letter for them to be like, oh, it was just a mistake, right? Because that's the thing. Immigration is all advocacy. So if you can advocate that it wasn't fraud, it wasn't a misrepresentation, you didn't mean it, you have a human who's reviewing the paperwork. They'll look at it and they'll be like, oh, okay, we understand. And then they'll move forward. So always be honest. I've also had situations where, I was in court and I had prepped this client. He was in jail. I had prepped him. We gone through everything. Gets on the stand and totally says something different than what we prepped.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there like, oof.
Yeah, going back home. Okay, your way back home.
What are we doing here?
I love people that think that they know more than.
Lawyer. Why do you hire the lawyer?
No. You are so smart. You are doing everything.
Go.
You will head up.
Oh my gosh. And so it's just like, I always tell like anyone before we start a consultation, before we start anything, I'm like, I need you to be honest with me. If I find out that you're not being honest with me, like I'm done. Like I'm not going to sit here and fight for you to tell me the truth for me to help you. You don't want my help or you don't want my help, So always be honest. I do recommend people get an immigration lawyer. A lot of people think immigration lawyers are just filling out people's names and addresses. It's way more than that. We do much more. We know trends, we know case law. And that's what you want, right? Like you want someone who could look at the law and be like, cool, I can advocate based off of XYZ for you.
A lot of range thing.
Yeah.
How much can people expect to be paying for like
build?
I'm
asking like how much?
How much can they expect to be billed? Like just range, for like an immigration lawyer, because it sounds like it's necessary.
Yeah. It sounds like the type of application that you're having, right? I would say that for the business space, those go a little bit more higher because the work is so much more intensive, right? So you can look at an immigration lawyer anywhere from like $3,000 to $6,000, right? For asylum is quick, right? So you gotta, if you have a good a good person who's advocating based off of you, it's going to be about the same range, about 4 to. I've seen attorneys charge 10. I don't know. We don't go that high, but like the range, the way that attorneys price their stuff is based off of their level of expertise, right? So how many years have they been in this, what their track record is like, but also how extensive the work is going to be. It's based off of time. That's why when you watch shows like Suits, it's billable. You're billing by the hour. So what is how long has the attorney been doing this? If you have an attorney who's only been practicing for a year and they're charging you $450 an hour, question it, right? Have some type of like expertise, or they're working in an office where like a senior attorney has the experience. But those are things that people should think about when they're hiring an attorney, because it is time based off of experience. I'm trying to think what's another piece of advice I would give.
Or resources.
Like what resources are available to them.
Especially like African immigrants.
Yeah, resources are hard, but like I know for like nonprofits are always really coming out with good things. I was working with a few nonprofits in New York City who, for asylum seekers, have toiletries that they give out and things like that. So I would say each attorney, there's like a bar association. So like I'm a member of the New York Bar and the New York City Bar Association. They usually have resources for people. So if someone doesn't know how to find a lawyer, they can always refer to those sources. Be careful between someone being a tax filer and someone being an attorney. A lot of people go to tax filers and then they come to me and they're like, my whole case is a mess. And I'm like, well, did you go to an attorney? And they're like, yeah, I did. And then I look at the person's name and look them up and they are not a lawyer. Definitely want to be careful about that.
Maybe Esquire on the end.
Esquire on the end, that's what officiates us, and then the last thing that I would say is like for anyone who is going through the immigration system, make sure you always have a copy of your documents and you are well informed. If you call your attorney and you're like, I want to know where my case is and what's happening, they should be giving you that information. You want to make sure you know what's happening in your case, because any consequence that happens is going to fall on you.
Your head.
Not exactly. Like you're the one. It's a consequence for you, right? Like you're the one who face anything that happens. So you want to be well informed on what's happening in your case.
That makes sense. 10,000%. Yeah. Last question. Well, actually, it may not be my last question. Maybe my second to last. Well, second to last, I guess. How can listeners like as us, like how can we support?
What part can we play?
Yeah, how can we help like advocate for like more equitable like policies? Is there anything that we can do on our part to say like we want better stuff?
Yeah.
Please?
Yeah, I think for that is we're in an era of social media. So I think on certain issues, of course, if you like research issues, like I always say, be well informed. One thing about social media is that there's a lot of clickbait, right? So you'll see one sentence and it'll be like, whoa, what's that? Like, just be well informed. And if you agree, I know a few people who are doing a lot of policy work, and they say sharing, liking things, calling your representatives on certain issues, right? So like the DACA thing, depending on where that goes, if state representatives could have a hold on that, then, just reaching out to them, to letting them know, because they represent you, right? I think a lot sometimes they represent you. You are the constituent. So if there are people calling them, then they have to act on that. That's the best way to support. And just
does this also apply for like, if I'm not a citizen, I don't have a green card, can I still call my rep?
Yeah.
Wait.
Yeah, you see your life?
Wait.
You see your representative?
You are an immigrant and you think you have US representative in Washington, D.C.?
You can. So we yeah, but it depends. Like if you're an asylum, like the nonprofit that I was working for in New York, like New York was trying to completely get like do away with the right to shelter. The people who were
Mm.
advocating for that were asylum seekers. So they were in Albany with their signs talking about, we need this, right? Like, we need the right to shelter. We are asylum seekers.
How do you take away
Asylum
somebody's
seekers
right to
have
shelter?
protection, in the US. So, you know, you can call, you want to be careful, because you
Not
don't
too
want
much now.
like, you know, we're gonna come after you now. You're violating some stuff, so definitely be careful. But yeah, you are entitled to some sort of rights while you're in the U.S. So yeah.
All right.
Nice. Okay, this is my last question for real. Where can the people find Diallo Law Group?
Come on.
What are they offering the people that they need to know about?
Yes, so we are on Instagram, on TikTok, Diallo Law Group. We also have a Facebook, but I don't know what the status of that is. But we also have a website. Our website is just diallolawgroup.com. We do offer free consultations. So if someone is like, I have this issue, I want to know, like, real quick, we offer 15-minute free consultations on the website. You can schedule for that. We post a lot of informative, like the 01 videos, just about like what people should know. It's not legal advice, but it's just like things to engage people to know that there are avenues, right? Now we're here on this podcast. So
Yeah.
Information here. I'm also going to be starting a podcast that just shines light into the struggles, but also the successes in immigration. Because, like we spoke about, there are a lot of misconceptions. It is called Concrete Borders Podcast, and it's going to be on Instagram, so you can find it on Instagram. And
Nice.
So we're all over
nice. Go and schedule your free 15-minute consultation. For all of you that are too shy to send questions, go and ask directly to the professional.
Yes,
they can help you out.
Yep.
Aisha, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun.
Yeah. Do you know we've been talking for like an hour or so?
Bass.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. We find you on the internet, Diallo Law Group. I think we cover all the big stuff. Yeah.
Concrete Borders podcast coming out.
Yes. And for the people that are also listening, please don't forget, you can support the people back home who can't really leave right now. You can go ahead and make a donation to Sudan and DRC, and we will match your donation.
We will.
I want to say this right now. The podcast, as we are, I think we have been chopping too much. We're on our way. We're wrapping up. The season is wrapping up. Don't get too comfortable. The time is running. Please go and donate before the season is over, okay?
Please, I thank you.
Yes. And until next week, guys.
All right.
Have a great one.
Thank you so much. Bye, guys.
Bye.